5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello again. Welcome back to Home and Abroad, an online writing seminar at Longwood University. We're at week 3, and it's possible you will slow or stall in the writing process. It's always easier to begin than to finish, and most of us tire at some point along the way of a major process. This is one reason I've said all along to write any part of the experience you wish to recount, not force yourself to go in a linear fashion. The first goal is to get the words out there. Later, we can put them in the right order. When I reach one of those blocks in a given project, I try to pick up something that stands for the burden of composition to remind me of the challenges I have already overcome in life. On a small table in my living room sits the Underwood standard typewriter I purchased as a high school senior in 1963 from a fleet of used machines being sold at an auction. Mechanical, black, ridiculously heavy, it's a tool I learned you must engage tactily, pounding the individual keys with fingers, hitting the space bar with thumbs, sending the carriage flying back with a flip of the wrist at the sound of a bell. This Underwood is a key to my stability, even as my aging makes it harder to hoist from the table than it was when I was young. I carried, perhaps lugged is a better word, this monster to college with me and on to graduate school. It traveled with me in my brief Army career, though not obviously to Vietnam, though there was a mate of sorts for me to use as an Army correspondent over there. At my first teaching position, I typed tests, scholarly articles, and drafts of stories I would later write about my military experience. Each finished piece was a material object. The key I pounded, levered an inverted piece of type up and smacked it onto a ribbon soaked with ink, leaving the shape of the letter on paper flattened against a pattern. With my hand, I struck the keys in the necessary order to produce words, arrange those words into sentences, shape the sentences into paragraphs. They all represented ideas, but ideas literally hammered into place by me with the Underwood standard. When the personal computer became available, sometime in the early 1980s, of course, I switched to the new technology. I still had a tendency to bang the keyboard and to reach up to return the carriage, but the speed of editing, the ease of producing and saving multiple drafts, the reduced cost of paper, one clean copy at the end, were obvious even to traditionalists. The Underwood was put away in a closet, forgotten for some years. The machine that had proven necessary to my academic and professional career returned as an objet d'art, something for children and even young adults to inspect next to old pocket watches, a few editions of hardbound books, memorabilia from my parents and my own lives. A key to the past, it sits appropriately in a house built in 1901. When I see my Underwood, I am reminded that writing is a labor to overcome disorder, an effort to gather into one structure disparate, sometimes warring elements of our world and ourselves. To impose pattern on my thoughts, feelings, and desires, I have put them into words, and those words into familiar shapes: letter, essay, short story, memoir, novel. When I hosted a writing seminar for veterans in my rural community one recent summer, I hoped I would be able to encourage the participants, all about my age, to achieve the same setting of things that matter into a comforting shape. I offered my advice from more than 35 years of teaching about shaping an argument, narrating an experience, describing a character. I explained, however, that the process would at times be challenging. Roadblocks might occur. It was possible to veer off course. They too would have to hammer words into relationships, even if their fingers were just tapping a touchpad or they were using voice recognition software. Still, whatever the effort, their sense of personal and communal history would be strengthened, I predicted, their approach to the future made clear, and the sense of who they are and what they've done become more sure. Though all achieve these ends, I will refer to only one individual, a military wife whose son lost a leg in Iraq. That admirable young man had recovered then to the point of skiing, completing college, running marathons, helping other veterans, marrying, starting a family. So the story was not about him, but about his mother, who flew from Virginia to Walter Reed to be with him as soon as possible after he was wounded, who lived at the nearby Fisher House as he went through rehab, who wrestled procedure, paperwork, and regulation for him long after he was released. She knew she had a story to tell, the trauma of a mother who almost lost her son. That story is not done. She finished one fine chapter, drew up drafts of several more, and continues to work as her busy schedule allows. Her family has entered into the process, reading drafts of different sections, offering memories, encouraging her to get it all out, to get it all in, to get it all right. She laughs when she tells me the project may expand to a series of books, not just one, with many collaborators. She has been pleased at each stage of the process, satisfied at the growth she has found in herself and in others through the process of writing. If my Underwood standard no longer has a function in producing documents, it serves as a key reminder to me of the solidity, the weight, and the staying power of experience put into words. Writing benefits the writer, in my friend's case, the writers, and readers. So, write a third draft of your experience, or a third part of it, whatever is easier at this point, whether it's early, late, or in the middle of the experience, and send it on to me for comments and suggestions. If you find yourself struggling with a project at this phase, understand that this is a familiar experience for writers. Count on the same traits that saw you through earlier challenges to carry you forward now. You can also write me about problems you're having, and I'll recommend ways to get the machinery running again. This is Hump Week in the seminar, and I am confident we will get over it. Let me borrow from a work in process as proof that what we want to say almost always finds its way into words. The central event of this tale, the gift of a carpenter's ruler from a grandfather to a grandson, is true. I've reshaped it into the preface of a novel I'm finishing, Farewell Route 66, to illustrate the idea that we can tell our life story. This little piece is called Measures, which is what a ruler does. It's a verb, but it also is a noun and a counting of some things or something. The narrator of this little piece is a woman approaching her 100th birthday. She's recounting her family's history to a son, Curtis, who transcribes it into a memoir, a chapter at a time. So here she goes. "Are you going to measure my photos with that?" I asked my son when he came back from the garage. He waved the carpenter's ruler back and forth as if he were a teacher wagging a finger at a student. "I'm going to take stock of my life," he said. I had been asking him for help putting a dozen shoeboxes full of family pictures into chronological order. Approaching my 100th birthday, I feel compelled to line up events in my past. Unless he was going to determine the height of these pictures in a stack, I didn't know how the ruler was to help. But then, my literal mindedness often is confounded by his penchant for unusual comparisons. "Remember," Curtis said, "that Grandpa gave me one of these and gave my brother Lewis one also." They have a younger sister, Carol, to be mentioned shortly. Of course, he wouldn't have given one to your sister. Girls don't get tools, at least according to elderly Swedish immigrants. "Correct," agreed Curtis, "though it turns out that you and Carol are the best builders in the family." He turned the ruler about in his hand. Still, this gift came with a heavy weight. "Oh?" I asked. Curtis was unfolding the brown wooden tool, which was hinged in 6-inch sections, 6 feet long when fully extended. "I was an impulsive kid, as you told me, throughout my growing up. I was always racing around and getting sudden inspirations that should have gotten more thought before being put into action." "You didn't break it?" I asked. "In less than 24 hours, he confessed. I loved unfolding it and refolding it, measuring stuff, determining distance." He paused. Lewis, of course, the older and wiser brother, put his ruler away so as never to break it. Smart boy. Now, I encouraged him. I can count a number of good qualities in you. I was joking. Humph, he said. Anyway, there I was the next day with 2 sections of ruler, a jagged break separating them. So what did you do? I asked. Well, a boy used to making mistakes. I decided to handle this mishap pretty quickly, hide the evidence, put the pieces way back in the drawer of a desk that Grandpa had actually built for me years earlier, cover them with papers, and I prayed there would never be an occasion to reveal, especially to Dad, that I'd carelessly snapped his father's gift to me in half. I laughed. I doubt if Oscar ever thought about it, lost in the clouds as theoretical physicists tend to be. But what you're holding looks like it has no breaks in it. Is it a replacement? Nope, he says. It's the original, brilliantly glued back together. By you? Yes, indeed. That little desk from my childhood, with its shameful contents of a broken ruler and other things I won't mention to you, stayed in Fairfield until I went off for my first real job in Atlanta. It's been with me since. So Grandpa's tool was hidden for how long in a desk he built himself? 30, 40 years? Well, it was always at least in the general area of that desk. I'd get one piece of it out now and then to measure something. I mean, it was still a ruler after all, or 2 short rulers. So one or the other part of it would wander out to my shop or into another room, even into my car. I said, it's good that it served a purpose. Curtis is like me, afraid to throw anything away because an occasion might arise the next day when that half a pencil or bent thimble or an old watch band would be just what was needed. So he said, now I see it performing a second function, much as those photos do in marking the shape of history. This is a function. I was digging around out in my garage recently and found one part of this. He held it up again. But then I remembered I had been using it in the house just the other day. So I asked him, you brought it from the house to the garage, or wait, was that the other half? That's it. I don't know when the 2 pieces got separated, but since I was always using one, it didn't occur to me that sometimes it was this half, he pointed, and sometimes the other. The numbering on the one side of the ruler is reversed. The mark for 4 feet is opposite one for 2 feet. 48 inches above is 24 inches below. It might never occur to the person that he had one part today, a different one yesterday. So Curtis goes on. I got the 2 pieces together and realized that its half a century jagged break was just the slanted kind that could be glued if it was well clamped and I used a quality epoxy. He handed it to me. I could barely find the scar where the 2 pieces had been joined. So I asked him, what I'm holding is the original ruler Grandpa gave you, restored and functional? He said, that's it. But this, he held up again, means more to me than that I have a ruler. You see, an adult, even a senior, well, a junior senior to you, I've repaired a mistake I made as a child. I joined the past and the present in one connected piece, affirmed a chronological continuum. I gave him back the ruler. I see, in your hands is a tangible object that was once in your grandfather's hands. When you remember that, you 2 are connected, sort of, shaking hands across time. He agreed. I also believe it's a more mature me reaching back and pulling my younger self forward. He put the repaired ruler on the coffee table. Hey, let's see this as an inspiration for your photo album project. Whenever you think there's a break in the story told by those pictures, you can be confident that there's a way to reconnect. If memory fails, I asked, the way we would do that would be, he winked conspiratorially. Why, we make it up, Mom. Imagination is the epoxy of history. That, of course, was when I began to wonder how much of what he'd told me was true. But then I decided that didn't really matter. It's always good to take the measure of things and strive for order. Okay, that's the end of my little story, fiction inspired by real events. A bit of honesty as a postscript. My mother did not live to be 100, though her older sister, my aunt, was 104 when she passed away. But in her final years, my mother lived with me and my wife, and we enjoyed the same kind of review of the past that goes on in that little story Measures. If I insist we can all construct a personal history, my mother is, at least for me, a model. So let's go forward together and put our histories in one piece. Oh, what is happiness? Oh dear. I've got people I grew up with that I've known for over 60 years. And I know who they are, and I value them, and they make me happy.